There is a season almost everyone quits in. Not because they ran out of faith, not because they were weak, not because they were wrong about what they were building. They quit because the season they were in looks, by every visible measurement, exactly like the thing is failing. The opposition increases. The resources thin out. The people who were supposed to help you turn against you. The thing you were promised seems further away now than when you started. Your own voice starts asking, was any of this real? And if you don't know that this season exists, if you don't know that it has a name, that it appears in almost every major breakthrough story in Scripture, that it is in fact a signal and not an indicator of failure, you will walk away. Most people do. Moses went to Pharaoh with a word from God. And what happened immediately after was not deliverance. The Israelites were told to make the same number of bricks with no straw provided. The burden doubled the day after God showed up. Nehemiah built the wall of Jerusalem in 52 days. But read chapter 6. The attacks reached maximum intensity when the wall had almost no gaps left, when the project was 95% complete. Not at the beginning. Right before the end. The disciples fished all night. Professional fishermen, their own waters, the right conditions. They caught nothing. And just as morning came, a figure stood on the shore. There is a season, right before the breakthrough, that almost everyone quits in. Here is what it looks like. Here is why it exists. And here is what the Bible says about what to do inside it. Before we go through the markers, I need to establish one principle that changes how you read everything that follows. The season before the breakthrough is not the same as the season of discipline, and it is not the same as God's silence. It has a specific character, and that character is this. It is the season where the gap between what you were promised and what you can currently see is at its absolute widest. This gap is not a malfunction. It is the architecture of faith. Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, which means faith, by definition, operates precisely in the space between the promise and the visible. Faith has no function when you can already see what you were told. You do not need faith for what is already in your hand. This means the season of maximum invisibility, the season where the promise seems furthest from reality, is not the season where faith is failing. It is the season where faith is most actively doing what it was designed to do. The enemy knows this, and the attacks in this season are calibrated specifically to close the gap, not by delivering the promise, but by convincing you the promise was never real. If he can get you to walk away 10 minutes before the door opens, he wins without having to stop what God was building. With that foundation in place, here are the markers. 5 of them. And if you are in this season right now, you will recognize yourself in every one. The first marker is this. The situation gets significantly worse in the immediate aftermath of a genuine move of God. This is the Israel principle, and it is one of the most important patterns in the entire Old Testament. Moses had spent 80 years being prepared, 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in Midian. He encountered the burning bush. He was given signs. His brother Aaron was sent to help. The elders of Israel believed the message. Everything was confirmed. And then Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said what God had told them to say. Pharaoh's response was not defiance. His response was to increase the burden. Exodus 5:6-7. That same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks. As before, let them go and gather straw for themselves." The quota stayed the same. The provision was cut. The Israelite foremen were beaten when the quota was not met. And then the foreman turned on Moses. "You have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants," they said, "and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Exodus 5:21. Moses himself turned to God in confusion. "Why did you ever send me? Since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all." Read that carefully. This is Moses, the man God spoke to in a burning bush. The man with the staff that would part a sea, saying, "This isn't working." Saying, "Things are worse now than before you sent me." Saying, in essence, "I don't understand what is happening." God's response was not an explanation. It was a command. "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh." The word "now" is significant. The escalation that looked like failure was actually the moment before God was about to move in a way Moses had never seen. Here is the diagnostic for this marker. Did things get harder specifically after a genuine step of obedience? After a genuine encounter with God? A genuine confirmation? A genuine act of faith? If the hardship arrived immediately after the move, and not before it, that sequence has a name. The enemy does not attack positions that aren't moving. He attacks movement. The intensification of opposition after obedience is often not evidence that you were wrong. It is evidence that what you stepped into was significant enough to be worth opposing. The second marker is this. The opposition reaches its most desperate and most creative intensity when the breakthrough is nearest. Nehemiah chapter 6 is one of the most strategically instructive chapters in all of Scripture. Nehemiah had been building the wall of Jerusalem. He and his workers had labored through mockery, threats, and armed resistance. And then comes chapter 6 with a sentence that should stop every person who is close to finishing something. When Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. The wall was nearly complete. The gaps were closed. Only the doors remained. And the commentary in the Nehemiah 6 narrative makes explicit what the enemy was thinking. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. That is the strategy. Not to defeat Nehemiah militarily, not to destroy the wall, to exhaust him psychologically when the work was 95% finished, to introduce fear and distraction with the gates left to hang. Sanballat invited Nehemiah to a meeting 4 times. False prophets were hired to give Nehemiah a bad report, to tell him God wanted him to flee. Letters were sent accusing him of planning rebellion. Every tactic was designed to pull Nehemiah away from the wall at the moment when completion was imminent. And Nehemiah's answer to every one of these tactics was the same sentence. "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down." He could see the strategy clearly. They were all trying to frighten us. And to the prayer, "Strengthen my hands," the answer was that he kept working. The wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul, in 52 days, and when the surrounding nations heard, they were afraid, and they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Here is what this means for you. The timing of your hardest opposition is itself a clue. Opposition at the beginning of a project is normal. Every project faces it. But opposition that reaches maximum creativity, maximum desperation, maximum frequency, specifically when the end is near, that is not ordinary. That is an enemy who can see the finish line even when you cannot. He is not attacking because you are failing. He is attacking because he knows you are close. The diagnostic question is this. Is the opposition you are facing more intense now than it was at the beginning? Are the attacks more personal, more frequent, more creative? Have people who were not previously involved suddenly appeared to discourage you? If yes, you may be closer to the gates than you realize. The third marker is the hardest to sit with. Right before the breakthrough, the darkness is often deepest and the silence is often longest. Peter and 6 other disciples went fishing on the Sea of Galilee. These were not casual fishermen. These were professional fishermen on their home waters, in the right conditions, doing the thing they had done their entire lives. They fished all night. John 21:3 records the result in 3 words. They caught nothing. All night, nothing. Professional expertise on familiar waters, and nothing. And then verse 4. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the beach. The sequence is not accidental. John is writing theology, not just history. The disciples were at the end of a fruitless night, at the point of maximum exhaustion and zero visible result, and it was precisely into that specific moment that Jesus appeared, not at hour 1, not at hour 4, at the breaking of the dawn, after the full night of nothing. And when he appeared, they did not recognize him. He called out from the shore, "Children, have you caught anything?" They said no. He told them to cast on the right side of the boat. They did. The net was so full they could not haul it in. The catch of 153 large fish did not come from a different night. It came from the same waters, the same boat, the same men, on the same morning that began with nothing. The only thing that changed was the direction of the net, at the instruction of a voice they initially did not recognize. The longest night and the greatest catch were not separate events. They were sequential. The darkness did not mean nothing was coming. The darkness was the last section of the night before the morning arrived. This is the most important marker of all, because it is the one you can only verify in retrospect. In the middle of the long, fruitless night, there is no way to distinguish it from a night that will stay dark. There is no internal signal that says the dawn is coming. There is only the instruction cast on the other side and the choice to follow it when you are exhausted and empty-handed. The fourth marker is this: the internal voice that says, "Stop, it's not working, you were wrong," reaches its peak volume specifically at the moment closest to the breakthrough. This is the Elijah pattern, and it sits inside the Nehemiah pattern, and together they describe the same moment from two different angles. Elijah's "it is enough, take my life" came after his greatest victory. Nehemiah's enemies sent false prophets specifically to introduce a discouraging word at the end of the wall's construction, and in both cases the voices arrived at the worst possible moment, which was also the most strategic moment. The false prophet who came to Nehemiah said, "Let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you." Fear dressed as wisdom, discouragement framed as spiritual counsel. And Nehemiah's response reveals the discernment required in this season. "I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him." He identified the voice by examining its fruit. The message was producing fear, not faith. It was pulling him from the work, not toward God. And fear, designed to paralyze you at the moment of near completion, has a specific source. Here is the diagnostic for this marker. The voice that says, "Quit, examine what it is producing." Does it lead you toward God or away? Does it bring you to your knees in prayer, or does it walk you away from the wall? There is a difference between conviction, which names a specific wrong and leads you toward correction and restoration, and the voice of this marker, which produces only exhaustion, confusion, and a sense that everything you built was a mistake. That second voice is not conscience. It is a hired prophet, and it is loudest when you are closest to the finish. The fifth marker is the quietest, and it may be the most important. In the season right before the breakthrough, there comes a point where you have already done everything within your capacity. You have prayed. You have been faithful. You have stayed at the wall. You have held the position. You have cast the net again after the long night, and there is nothing left to do but wait for the morning to show you what was in the water all along. This is the moment that separates the person who experiences the breakthrough from the person who leaves before it arrives. Joseph had done everything he could do by the end of his time in prison. He had been faithful in Potiphar's house. He had interpreted the cupbearer's dream correctly. He had asked to be remembered. He could not open the prison door from the inside. He could not force Pharaoh to have a dream. He could not manufacture the moment. The only thing left to him was to remain, to stay in the place where God had put him, doing what was in front of him, not manufacturing an exit. And on the morning of his promotion, he did not know it was the morning of his promotion. He had been a prisoner for years. He woke up that morning as a prisoner. He could not see from inside the cell what God was arranging outside it. The fifth marker is this: Your job in this season is not to force the door. It is not to manufacture the breakthrough. It is to stay faithful in the position where God placed you and trust that what He is doing outside your line of sight is finishing what your faithfulness inside it began. Nehemiah kept building. The disciples cast on the other side. Moses went back to Pharaoh. And in each case, the breakthrough came when they continued, not when they cleverly engineered a solution, but when they stayed. Before I close, I need to say something carefully. This framework is not a guarantee. It is not a promise that every difficult season precedes a specific breakthrough you have already decided on. Some seasons are seasons of discipline, and what is breaking is not the darkness before the dawn. It is a pattern in your own life that needs to break before the next season can begin. Some seasons are transition seasons, and what feels like failure is actually God closing one chapter before opening another. The 5 markers I described are not a checklist that proves your breakthrough is coming on a specific timeline. They are patterns that help you recognize a season so you can respond to it rightly with faithfulness and perseverance, rather than with panic or premature exit. And the response to all 5 markers is the same one Nehemiah gave 4 times to 4 different invitations to come down from the wall. I am doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Not arrogance, not denial of the opposition, clarity about the priority. He was not ignoring Sanballat. He was refusing to let Sanballat's urgency reorder what God had called him to build. The wall of Jerusalem was finished on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. 52 days. For a project that had been attempted and abandoned for decades. A project that Israel's enemies were certain could not be completed. And when they heard it was done, the surrounding nations were afraid, not of Nehemiah, not of Israel, but of the God who had done this. The commentary says they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. What broke the enemies was not the wall itself. It was the evidence of who was behind it. And the wall was finished because of the people Nehemiah records in chapter 3, ordinary people, most of them unnamed, who repaired the section opposite their own house. They worked where they were. They worked what was in front of them. They stayed at the wall when the false prophets came. They held their position when the letters arrived. They kept building. The morning comes for people who are still at the wall when it does. The disciples who caught 153 fish on the morning of their breakthrough were the same disciples who had caught nothing all night. The dawn did not come to a different crew in a different boat. It came to the exhausted men who were still on the water when the sun rose. You do not know what morning you are on. You do not know how close the shore is. You do not know what is already arranged on the beach, waiting for you, built by hands you have not yet seen. What you know is what Nehemiah knew, and what kept him at the wall. This is a great work, and you cannot come down